Welcome back to another installation episode of the Headless Homesteader. I am slowly figuring out what my garden planning process is going to be. I've done some just planting in the past when it comes to smaller scale things, but planning out our about 1 acre for max efficiency has been a little bit of a process. And so I'm going to share kind of what I'm working with now, which is just this simple brain book, I'm going to call it. It's just a free book that I got at a conference. And I'm going to transition that into this notebook. This is used to be for my national programming, and I had some, federal notes and things like that for a national program. But with the current state, again, for full transparency, I don't know if I'm going to have a job long term with the transition and the current state of America as it is right now. So with the just very blatant attack on federal workers, which has been its own challenge and its own sense of grieving, sense of unknown, I just feel like I can repurpose this into something that I can section out and use more efficiently than this little tiny book here. I mean, there's quite a bit of difference. What I've done initially is I have laid out the beds that I've repurposed and built, and I've kind of organized it into companion plants. I've mocked out our space for our primary kind of crop rotation, I call it the workhorse area. And then I have more of a fun area in the front, which is mainly for, I'm going to say the fun stuff, the flowers for our front beds that I've recently redug out the soil and I'm starting to work on, as well as some herbs and natural things that I want to try my hand at. One thing is a willow tree. I want to try some rooting hormone work with that, and this isn't doing it. I think I can do a better job at not only the companion planting, but also my dates, kind of keeping a better record of when I'm planting, when I'm seeding and sowing, and it needs a little zhuzhin up. So that's what I am doing today. This is a learning process for me, and part of it is for sanity. Part of it is to try to be in the green space in our back patio as I can while it's cold and dreary outside, but I'm learning, so I'm sharing that with all of you. I wanted to showcase some books that I'm using currently. These are the first ones that I've purchased for specifically homestead planning, and this one by far has been the most beneficial. Highly recommend. It not only gives planning information about when to plant, how to plant. One of the most kind of things that I think I'm excited about is planting in a way that maximizes space through companion planting. And this little table for ground rules of what are friends and what are not friends has been just a fantastic little planning buddy, planning aid. Each page not only has the information, but the quotes and the little tips and tricks in between for planting. On Wit and Wisdom, it says, use a stainless steel knife, not carbon steel, to cut eggplant or the flesh will discolor. Eggplant originally came in only small white varieties. Hanging on the plants, the fruit looked like eggs, hence its name. I love stuff like that. And I think even more fitting for the time that we are in, the companion plants, it says, in the end, there is no desire so deep as the simple desire for companionship. And I don't know, I love little thoughtful things like this. And they also include a voice of experience. So I use basil sown with my tomatoes as it invigorates the tomatoes, and I can use it in pesto and other tomato dishes once it's harvested. There's just a lot of really, really great information in this book when it comes to vegetable growing. And if you are starting a garden, this has been such a wonderful resource. Next, I have this mini farming self-sufficiency on 1/4 acre, and it's okay. I don't know that I would buy this book again. I've thumbed through it, and I think it deserves another thumb through before I give a final review of it. But I find that there's a lot of text and there's a lot of knowledge in here, but it just doesn't resonate with me as far as like my learning. I have a background in education and curriculum building, and it's okay. So this one, I'm still figuring out if I like it. I don't love it yet, not on first glance. And then the other one that I'm using at the moment is the second edition. And I have gone through this one. I think there is a ton of information, a ton of quality information, looking at just how many different facets of homesteading and depth of self-sufficiency. So this one gets into bridge building. It even has fences and gates, as well as canning. The amount of canning information in this one is really good, which I will be learning to can in the process. This one I also need to spend a little bit more time with. This is really where we're pulling a lot of the information for my garden planning. Fingers crossed I have a good crop this upcoming year. But I'm going to now take my chaos, my current book, and reorganize it into a better garden plan for this upcoming year. I'm also going to keep a little kind of almost reflective notes on what's working, what is absolutely not working. And then I hope to translate that into maybe my first year lessons learned and just share that with anyone that's interested. Because I think online we see a lot of really established homesteaders that have a lot of really fantastic information to share. But I am just starting out, and I'm hoping that this will provide value to someone who doesn't have a background in farming. I grew up in the South and I grew up in the country, but we didn't have a farm. I'm learning. You guys are going to be along for the ride. So using the idea of those companion crops, I am using our workhorse specific crops in the back area, which kind of looks like this. So these are essentially the back windows to our sun porch, and we have come out a back door, and then I have a bed here, and a bed here. I'm going to set up some compost over here, but this section right here, I'll share with you all what I'm doing there. So per this book, using the Vegetable Gardener's Handbook, these specific items, which we eat a lot of these, this is going to be, like I said, the workhorse crops. So I'm using 3 specific things as kind of the grounding crop to that bed, and then planting these other items in and around. And so when you look at the crops here, I've kind of starred those as well. And so the companion plants, if you look at the friends, I've picked out what we would probably eat the most of in order to ground with that crop. So I found its friends. I'm planting these in the beds as described, and then I want to make sure that I'm keeping away from these items here that might conflict or not grow as nicely with my core 3 workhorse crops. So for the beans specifically, I'm going to add a different structure that we're going to try. Essentially this structure, I'm going to kind of trellis the beans. So since I'm not using this anymore, I'm going to kind of show you guys. It's a square little item that has these boards in between, but I'm going to raise that using 4 posts to lift that off the ground. So underneath here where the soil is, I want to do basically a trellis with some thread coming down into the ground so that the plant will grow up onto this flat square of a trellis and essentially just create a nice raised bean outcrop grow area there. So I'm thinking not only will I have the beans here, I might do a central post here to try more of an upgrow tower method versus this kind of gridded method. So I don't know yet. We'll see. But when I'm talking about workhorse crops, I have these as our primary, and then I've seeded accordingly. Currently, I have cabbage, kale. My spinach is looking really good. I have celery, but also coriander seeds for that as well. I haven't started tomatoes. I haven't started carrots. I only have one little thing of green onions. I'm going to do the onions proper. And then I have 3 bell peppers and 6 jalapenos started, but this one I have more options coming, and I'll probably, outside of this bed for our number 2 bed here, what I'm thinking is I might actually do a couple rows of peppers as well coming off there. So we'll see. For our last one, we talked about the beans. I have some simple black beans, which I accidentally sprouted while I was soaking beans, and I threw them in a little bit of dirt and they started to seed and they look beautiful. If you watched my first video, it was one of the green plants sitting next to me. I have not started broccoli. I have not started cauliflower. And while we were in California, I grew some green zucchini squash and it was absolutely successful. I'm really hoping our weather here, knowing that we're in a different zone, I'll have the same luck, but I have some different places I'm going to be growing this squash, but specifically for this bed 3. If you notice here, this is where the squash is going to go, and I really want to do a little tunnel here that has a gridded area where you can have the basically hanging squash. So I'm going to attempt that as well as in ground. So we have a lot of plans. I hope that they turn out, but I'm going to continue working on transferring this chaos into this a little bit more organized, and I think I'll actually have the solidified grow plans for each bed and this space a little bit more viewer friendly because this looks like a hot mess. So I'll show you all the end product once we get there. Okay, so we've made some progress on the workhorse crops specifically. We talked about the cabbage, the tomatoes, the beans. Now I've paired different herbs for different reasons with these specific workhorse crops. And I'm utilizing this book just like we've been talking about, the guide. And the wonderful thing about this is that looking at the partnership of these, for example, I have chosen thyme to partner with my cabbage as well as sage and oregano. And I did that strategically because thyme can enhance these specific items as well as repel different pests. So thyme, for example, there we have sage and oregano. Oregano enhances pumpkins but repels pests in general. And sage enhances cabbages, carrots, marjoram, strawberries, and tomatoes and can repel, again, more pests. So I've just strategically started to plan the bed. For example, 1 is complete, and I've made a little note section here. I've taken that very, very rudimentary mock-up of my initial brain there. You can see the 4 windows, and made it just much more legible and much more planning friendly. So again, this is the sunroom. We have a door right here that comes off. I'll have this first bed with cabbage. I have decided to place some mint here strategically because of the repellent factors as well, general pests. And then I've looked at some areas that could potentially be additional in-ground rows to complement the tomato bed, which will have jalapenos and different peppers. The beans specifically, we talked about that little outcrop or little extension for the elevated planting. And then I've chosen rosemary and borage to be complementary. And so what I've done is taken each bed here and I've mocked it out to how and where I want to plant what based on height, based on accessibility within the planter. Thyme, sage, oregano all planted here. We have spinach on the two sides, kale, celery, and cabbage kind of flanking those. And then our second bed, growing the tomatoes off this back side would allow me to have additional area if I wanted to have some more effective vining. Peppers, we looked at the side out rows as potential options, so that's just very strategically placed, as well as the basil to tomatoes, very beneficial, partnering onions and parsley, and then dill and carrots. And then the last little section, it's a little bit different. I'm going to take the repellents and the different herbs and do it around the corner of the bed for something a little bit different, but it also allows more space for the broccoli, cauliflower. The beans will go nicely, that extra little elevated grow area, and then the squash, particularly off this side, and I'll be able to extend a really a hanging tunnel for the squash to grow into, something that'll kind of move it outside the bed as it expands, because I'm sure what I'm going to plant, fingers crossed at least, like I'm hopeful that it'll just really become abundant. That's the initial mock-up. All right, well, that was a brief overview of our workhorse crops that our family is going to eat the most of, and I hope will be abundant throughout the year. As I'm learning to can, learning to seed properly, all of these things, we've taken this chaos that was the initial plan and turned it into a workable list, a nice mock-up. I will share with you guys along the way. In the next video, I think it'll be a little bit more fun, a little bit of the aesthetic. We have the front yard to tackle, which has a lot of herby, flowery things that are pollinators, and why I'm planning what where for different reasons. So I'm excited to tackle this next. But as always, thank you all. I hope if you stumble upon this video, it's value add and you learn something along the way. So thank you so much.